Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Gold Hoops and God podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Guerra, and I'm super excited for today's guest. It is my fabulous friend, Drea Hightower. Hi, Drea. So, Andrea is amazing. I have known Andrea for many years now. Also, we originally met at the University of San Francisco. And I met her when I was working in resident ministry, and we actually went to volunteer together. And she was the sweetest person. And I'm so glad that we became friends. And today is a very auspicious day. We're recording on her birthday. Woo woo! So Virgo Queen in the house.
First day of
Super
fall.
awesome. Right. First day of fall. So good. Yeah. So Andrea, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit and tell the people, a little bit about Drea?
Yeah, my name is Drea, Andrea, just call me Drea. Um, I am originally from Arizona and I moved to the Bay Area actually, I moved here the day after Christmas in 2004 to go to the University of San Francisco. And then shortly after moving here, I met you. And yeah, so great friendship budded from there. And um, yeah, so, I've really found kind of like my calling, I was politicized, when I
Mm-hmm.
was at the University of San Francisco. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, it just really, in the Bay Area too, just has a way of like embracing you. And I
Mm-hmm.
just really grew up here and you know, uh, stretched and expanded here in the
Mm-hmm.
Bay Area. And I have been here now for, it'll be 20 years coming up this December 20.
Christmas, right? Yeah.
So, yeah. And I just moved to San Jose 2 years ago. I'd previously been living in Oakland all that time.
Mm-hmm.
Now I live in San Jose
Mm-hmm.
with my husband. And yeah, we're just doing the dang thing out here. And I work for an organization called Global Exchange. It's an international human rights organization, and I've pretty much been with them. You know, I guess it's been about 16 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah,
So great. So
snapshot. Just a little snapshot about Drea.
a little background snapshot about Drea. Yeah. So there's so many things that we can touch upon. For the podcast, I try to focus a lot on culture, Latina identity, and also like religion and spirituality broadly defined, right? So kind of like I'm encouraging my guests to sort of unpack their spiritual journey and things like that. I know Andrea is an amazing world traveler. She's traveled to many countries in Latin America and the Caribbean, also spent a lot of time in Iran and other, amazing places. And so I would love for her to share a little bit of that journey as well. So, shall we start with culture? So,
Let's get into it.
culture is really a fascinating topic always, but in particular, I think that Andrea's journey and story is very, very fascinating. So, sip the tea, sip the tea,
Oh,
real quick, real quick.
get your coffee, get your tea
Get
ready.
your coffee, get it ready. Oh my gosh, friend. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So, how should we begin? How should we begin this?
Okay, why don't I just dive into
You
it?
want to let's do
I'll
a
just
deep dive.
dive
Yeah,
in.
let's
And
go
I'll
for
try
it.
and not make it too wordy because we should let everybody know that, Dr. G and I can talk. So
Oh,
we'll try.
we could be here all day. Yeah, yeah.
So, okay, the long and the short of it is, okay, growing up, I was always a melanated kid. Okay. As far as I knew, I grew up in Tempe, Arizona. And as far as I knew, like, it was just a white kid. That's
Hmm.
all I knew. Um, and probably around like the second or third grade, I remember being called bad names. I remember being called a
Oh
spick and not really understanding what that was.
my gosh.
And then I can remember the story very clearly about, being asked if I was Mexican.
Hmm.
And, at that age, I was still kind of trying to, not trying, but like the concept of racial identities other than just like using like color identifiers is
Right.
something that you're like that I was growing into, I guess.
Right. Right.
And where I lived, there were a lot of Native people, and I grew up near a town called Guadalupe.
Mm.
And so at that time too, I didn't understand I didn't know actually, I not even understand like indigenous Mexicans at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So, in the town of Guadalupe, there are a lot of indigenous Mexicans there.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so obviously too in Arizona was all Mexico, it the
Yep.
so, and there are these enclaves, villages that were still there
Yeah.
when the border was created. So, in this town in particular too, there's a lot of Yaqui.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so like that, those are primarily like the folks that I was going to school. There were a lot of them going to school with me and my friends,
Right.
were Yaqui and stuff. But then I also had the concept and knowledge of like Native peoples as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, primarily like Navajo or like Pima Indians.
Mm.
So anyway, growing up, I just thought I was a white girl. And in around second or third grade, I started having kids start asking me like if I was
Wow.
Mexican
Interesting. Huh?
or if I was Indian.
Mm.
And I just, you know, I as in second or third grade, like I said, everything's just very like,
Yeah. When you're little, it's like these categories don't really make sense. It's like,
yeah,
what does this mean? Yeah.
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 And it's not like you're entering into this area of like education yet where people,
Mm.
where you're really diving deep into these things,
Right.
like, um,
Ethnic studies was not popping at that time.
exactly.
Right.
So we'll get to
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, so, basically, at some point, I asked my dad about it. Like, Dad,
Mm.
am I Mexican? He got very angry with me.
Wow.
Um, yeah. And so I could never understand this concept. I could never understand why my dad was mad about that.
Right.
And I couldn't understand too, like why my dad he had like I'm not gonna like sugarcoat it. My dad was racist.
Mm.
Definitely
Hard.
had some like bias against people of color,
Mm.
and especially someone who was like Mexican. And so
Really?
I never got it. And so as I started to grow up, I started thinking, okay, my dad just has this like uh oh, I should also say like I talked to my mom about it. She goes, well, your dad does have some native blood, right?
Mm.
And she's like, I don't even know what to tell you. And so I just had this idea in my head that my dad had this internalized racism.
Oh, uh-huh.
And, I was just like, well, that's unfortunate. Like that's,
Sure.
so I just didn't know how to grapple with that. And I thought, well, maybe one day I'll do a DNA test and figure it out. Because for me then coming of age and everything, these things started to become important.
Yeah. The
Like I want
questions.
to know,
Yeah.
like,
Who am
if
I?
I
Hmm.
have these roots, I think it's important
Yeah.
for who I am, for my identity. And also, I also think too, because I grew up around these populations
Yeah.
and it just felt so familiar.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the
Mm-hmm.
part that is, I guess, very interesting to the story.
Mm-hmm.
All of this felt familiar.
Mm-hmm.
Whether I was at a powwow, it felt
Connection. Yeah.
familiar. Whether we were at the tianguis in Guadalupe, the
Mm-hmm.
market there,
Mm-hmm.
whether it was like listening to like, corridos, Mexican corridos or like the food or something, it just
I
all
got chills.
felt
Yeah. Yeah.
familiar. And
Mm-hmm.
it felt good and it felt right. And
Mm-hmm.
it didn't feel like, oh, I'm just kind of latching onto this culture.
Foreign or strange or
It's
like
beautiful,
other, or like what is the, yeah.
or
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. Yeah.
like how people
It
are.
resonated. It was something
Like,
deeply resonant. Mm-hmm.
and I
Mm-hmm.
think too that
Yeah.
and I'm not an apologist. I'm just somebody who likes to try to understand people's motivations,
Sure.
and how things are. So I think people do that though. I think they latch onto those things in their culture, A, because it does feel good, but I feel it's also things that lack within their own knowledge and understanding of their culture,
Mm-hmm.
you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
or the vibrancy of their culture. Let's just be real.
Yeah.
So anyway, long and short of it, I just always felt connected to it. And I remember there's a story I tell too that when I was in junior high, there were teachers that came from the high school to help us
Mm-hmm.
enroll in classes. And I was brought into this one group. We sat in this classroom, like it was like me and like 40 other students.
Mm-hmm.
There were two teachers there, and they were there to help us enroll for classes for high school.
Mm-hmm.
And, um, they started speaking in Spanish. Now, because of, the families I grew up around, well, I was going to be polite, even if I didn't know everything they were saying. I didn't know the majority of what they're saying, but there were little bits and pieces I could understand.
Uh-huh.
So I just like sat there patiently and quiet, listened, tried to take it in. Also, they were speaking in Spanglish. It wasn't like
Oh, right, right.
fluent,
Mm-hmm.
like all the way through Spanish.
Yeah.
It was like
Yeah.
Spanglish, but it was a classroom for um, Spanish speakers. So English is a second language.
Oh.
And so everybody's got their head down. They're starting to look at, their classes. They're supposed to come up with a draft of what classes they want to take. The
Mm-hmm.
teachers are coming around to help.
Mm-hmm.
So this lovely woman comes around who's like very vibrant and like moving, and she's like got a lot of energy, right?
Yeah.
Norma Garcia.
You
And
remember her name? That's awesome. Wow.
yeah, because it turned out that her daughter would be one of my best friends.
Wow.
Yeah. In high school. So,
That's
um,
cool.
and,
That's very
and
cool.
that's what there's a story there too, but I'll save that for another one. But anyway, and she starts talking to me, and she's like, "¿Entiendes?" And I'm like, "Yeah."
Jennifer.
And then she's like, "Do you speak English?" I said, "Yeah." She's like, she did a cut to the chase. It's like, "Are you Mexican?" And I'm like, "I don't think so, no." She's like, "Mierda, you're in the wrong classroom."
Oh my God.
She's like, "But let's see what we can do, and then let's just get you to the right class, right?" So
Wow.
yeah, it was fascinating. It was
So she hadn't noticed? Do you know what I mean? Like if she hadn't noticed or stopped or like checked in with you, like
right. Well, and also like the
it's just so
question is like, how did I
crazy.
get there in the first place?
Yeah. 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 Wow.
And
So
I
fascinating.
mean, then not so much now because California has a way of draining the color out of me sometimes. But like then I was always like pretty dark, like
Mm.
pretty tan. But anyway,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
yeah. So I finally got situated and everything. But fast forward, um, she would be a wonderful. Well, she was my friend's mother. Sadly, she passed away, but she
Mm.
taught me a lot. She brought me into her home. I learned so much
A
about like,
special
and
lady.
when we were in her home, she only spoke Spanish,
Mm.
and because she was a Spanish teacher at the high school,
Oh,
and so she
yeah.
had these beautiful parties. So we would make papel
So
picados,
fun.
help her cook, all
Yeah.
that. Anyway, but let's get to the story, and this
Yeah.
will be quick. But so my dad, who I have known as my birth father, all my life, whatever, had dementia,
Mm.
and it started to really show itself.
Mm.
And so I had told my mom, like, I really think it's important that I do a DNA test before he gets too far along, in this whatever. And she goes, okay, yeah, you're probably right. So I had gone home for spring training in March.
Mm.
And I just
Dre's a huge baseball fan, by the way.
Dodgers. Anyway,
Oh, 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 oh.
don't got time for
What
that
was
on
that,
this.
50 out of 50? What was that? 50 slides, world records already? What?
Anyway,
We won't go there. We won't go
we
there.
won't go there. Basically, I went home for a spring training, and it was that morning. I got up, and my mom had coffee ready, and she's like, I need to talk to you, and I'm like, okay, what's up? And she's like, have a seat, and I'm like, Mom, what are you
Uh-oh. Mm-mm, yeah.
doing? Don't
You're scaring me, Mom. Yeah.
like, no,
What's
I'm not
going on? Yeah.
crying or anything. And she basically says to me, she's like, look, your dad and I, we weren't always together. And no, I didn't know that. Yeah, we were separated for some time. I said, okay.
Mm.
She says, and I was seeing somebody during that time. Okay. And she goes, well, something happened. And I was seeing somebody during that time. Okay. And she goes, well, something happened. And I was seeing somebody during that time. Okay. And she goes, well, something happened. And she goes, well, something happened. And she goes, well, something happened. And she goes, well, Okay, Mom. And so I'm waiting for it, and she's like, and I'm like, oh, you got pregnant. She said, I got pregnant. I was like, oh. So in my mind right away, I'm like, oh shit, I got me a sister or
You're
brother.
thinking there's a sister out there, a brother out there that I haven't met yet. Okay, okay, right,
Yeah,
right.
I'm
This
like,
is where your mind is going. Yeah, yeah.
my mind really actually took off with that story
Yeah,
too. I was like,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I was like, oh, okay. So what happened? And she's like, what? What do you think happened?
Oh my
And then it was just like that everything shifted. You know, it's like the floor fell out below me, and I remember like not feeling my stomach,
oh my gosh.
and I'm like, wait, are you
What?
telling me that
What are you saying? Yeah.
dad may not be my dad? She said, yeah. And you know, I'm like, wait, come on, Mom.
Hold up, hold up, hold up, hold up. You're like, wait a minute. Hold up.
Yeah, because I'm like, you're a
That's
woman. You
intense.
know, women know. You know.
Oh my God.
And she's like, no, I really didn't know, you know, like and literally like this man and I just were together one time. We just saw each other for a short time, and
Oh my
we
God.
were, you know, there was an attraction. We were friends, but like, you know, he was separated from his wife and I was separated from her dad.
Right, right, right.
And she's like,
The
so
timing of it all. Yeah. Oh my
yeah,
God.
she's like, but it was kind of like you were the miracle baby because, you know, your father and I tried for 12 years and nothing. And then all of a sudden, so yeah, she's like, well, do you want to know about this guy? And I'm, well, okay. She goes, do you have any questions? And I'm like, well,
Yeah. A million questions. Oh my God.
what? Do I have questions?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
know, and so, you know, she's like, what can I do for you? I'm like, well, first you're going to get online right now and order that 23andMe. So
1,000%.
we can
Yes.
just like,
For
you know,
everybody's testing right now.
I'm like,
Exactly.
go ahead and tell me about him. And she's like, all right, well, you know,
Wow.
his name is Juan. And
This is
she
wild.
starts telling me about who he is. He's been involved in politics. He's highly educated. He speaks some, you know, bunch of languages or whatever.
Wow.
He's been a professor. He's, you know, worked in the area of law. So, and I'm
Mm.
like, you know, like, and it's crazy because everything she's saying is like all these things that also are kind of who I have been,
They're
area
kind
that
of
I've
like passions of
been
yours too.
involved in my life, like
It's
whether
so
it's
insane. It is the
politics
most insane thing
or
ever. No.
languages or culture.
No, yeah.
So, you know, I'm just floored. So
Yeah.
like that turns out this, you know, so I'll just like fast forward it. Turns out, you know, I connected with him. We got the
Wow.
23andMe. Turns out, yes, this other man is my father.
Oh my gosh.
So, you know, I grew up with a dad. You know, God rest his soul, Bill.
Yeah.
I have a biological father, Juan,
Um,
and then I have my step pop, my pop who passed away last year, Ed.
mm.
And so, you know, I'm rather blessed. I have three dads.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, and it turns out that like Juan is a there's a lot of complications with this identity as well, but he is Spanish Mexican
Mm.
and indigenous.
Mm.
So, you know, he is has a very proud Spanish roots.
Hmm.
And but he is also very Mexican and
Mm.
very there are these also native of course being Mexican, he's you
Yeah.
know mestizo, so he's got like these
So
native
Spanish is in Spain Spanish.
yeah.
Okay. Yep. So
So
all the
all the
things, right?
things,
All the identities, the
all
whole
the,
Mexican
we got the
history,
whole
all the whole thing in one person. There you go.
mole over here.
This is the lived experience.
Yeah.
This is the lived experience
Yeah,
right
and
there.
then I
Yep.
mean, and then like when you come
Incredible. It's
like the
complicated.
identifiers too, it's like
Yeah.
there's Navajo, there's Zuni, and I actually don't know if there. I don't believe there's Yaqui,
It's a
but
lot to navigate. Like, I don't think people would fully understand. Like, it's very hard to have like multiple identities, like having parents from like multiple backgrounds, growing up in a different third, fourth place. It's
yeah,
not easy to navigate because
yeah.
it's like, it brings up this question of like, who am I for real?
Oh,
Because,
yeah,
right? I mean, even so, my other episode, our mutual friend, Alex Drake, talked about this question of identity. She was born in Honduras. And yet, right? And yet, the Latinx kids were giving her a hard time.
right,
How does
right.
that make sense? Anyways, side note.
Yeah,
But
but no,
yeah,
that's very
it's
valid
tough.
because
It's tough.
now I've entered this very interesting area at this age because
Sure.
obviously
What age do you mind telling folks, like,
very,
more or less, like, what age you were when you found out? Like,
yeah, I'll reveal the age.
if you more or
Well, actually, don't ask me to do the math, but
it
I
was
was
a couple of years ago, right?
in my
Like,
40s.
yeah,
Yeah,
you
it
were in your
was
40s. There you go. Yeah.
my mom told me in March of 2019, and we confirmed right away. And then I met Juan in June of 2019,
Wow.
as well as I met my, at that time, my 19-year-old little sister,
Wow.
and then my older brother,
Yeah, they're siblings. Yeah.
and my older sister, and then there's another older brother who's since passed, but he was
Wow.
living in North Carolina or something. But that's very
Fascinating.
interesting. You were talking about Alex's story. Yeah, so
Yeah.
one thing that's very interesting about this experience is that all the things that I had felt, I think really is kind of this interesting testament to like, you can't take something that's so deeply ingrained in your
Yes.
DNA,
Mm-hmm.
in your whatever, the fabric of who you are. You can't take
Mm-hmm.
it away. You
Exactly.
just
You
can't. And
can't take it away.
no matter what,
Yeah.
it's a part of your path. It's your part of your ancestors. It's
Exactly.
going to be there. And I think that's why all of those things were so familiar, so comforting, so right for me. And it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
that I was, trying to take someone's culture. No,
Fit
that was really
in or right, 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 right.
now I've entered this interesting area, especially like as an older adult, whatever. Like sometimes I have like the imposter syndrome.
Oh,
I'm like, can I say that I'm Mexican? Can I talk about my experience? It
yeah.
may not be
Yeah.
this like this
The typical
experience
path.
that,
Right.
white
But
Mexicans
yeah,
go through, but I have my
it's
experience.
your
So like
story.
Indigenous people, like
Yeah.
that's who I still am.
It's
This
your
is the
story.
fabric of who I am.
Absolutely. It's your story.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's so funny. So I will share I will share this. When Andrea called me or told me, she's like, "Girl, I got news. Guess what? What did I say to you?"
You were like, you clapped. You were like, bitch, I knew. I
I
knew.
did. I did. I was like, I knew you were Latina. I knew you were Latina. I knew it. I knew it. There's no way.
Yeah.
There was no way.
Yeah. And
It's like when
actually,
they open the
this
envelope and they're like, "You are the father." I'm like, I knew it. I knew she was Latina.
the fun.
I
Actually,
knew
and
she was Latina.
that was very common with people. They're like, yeah.
Everyone was like,
Actually,
"Duh."
Clara, the one that her
That's
mom
hilarious.
you know, was Norma, the
From the
one that
school. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
at school. When I told her, she was like, huh, of course you are. She's like, I could have told you that, stupid. Like,
I love it. No, so for like a little bit of like context and background, Andrea is like fluent in Spanish. She's traveled, again, like all over Latin America. I know has a deep connection to El Salvador and Cuba. Just her, like, just something about her spirit, if we can say that. Yeah, I knew. I was like, yeah, anyway, but
yeah. Yeah,
that's
it
awesome.
was like that moment, that aha moment,
It all
like,
clicked. Yeah. It all clicked.
just
It
makes
all
sense
clicked.
now. Yeah. And
Oh
it
my
really
goodness.
did. It was, I feel for my mom because she had been carrying
Hard.
this
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
so long, and that's such a heavy weight to carry.
Yeah.
And a lot of people were like, "Were you mad?" I was like, "No, actually,
Mm,
I wasn't mad. I actually
mm,
felt bad for my mom that she had to carry that knowledge with
mm.
her, and I had empathy for my mom,
Wow.
And then in the same moment, I was
Amazing.
like, there was this huge weight taken off my shoulders because finally I
Um,
felt like I'm all this makes
it
sense.
all
It
makes
all
sense.
makes sense now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I felt this liberty of
Beautiful.
like, now I can move forward
Yes.
of really knowing who I am
Hmm.
and diving into that.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Yeah. I mean, that totally makes sense. The almost like a sense of relief, right? Like all these pieces, like the puzzle pieces finally made sense,
Yeah.
right? Like it's like you were missing that one piece and now it was like unlocked. Oh my God, right? It's
Yeah.
incredible. That's super cool. Um, so speaking of like spirit and things like that, I know Andrea has spent a lot of time in Cuba, and so in another episode with another friend of mine, she's Cuban American, and she was talking about her family and their background as they're Baptist, right? Like they're like 3, 4 generations of Baptist ministers and everything else, which is super cool. But what we're talking about is how Cuba is a land of many different practices, including, right, like including Santeria and other like rituals and traditions that are often marginalized or kind of, misunderstood for sure by outsiders, we can say. So I'd be curious if you want to share sort of about your experience in Cuba in terms of like religion, and even if you're comfortable sharing about your own journey, right? Like that interior journey, that spiritual journey. Um, yeah, that'd be awesome.
Definitely. Well, I think that, this is, a great segue because it's like this was part of what I felt before I even found out. Like I had been
Sure,
doing work in Cuba for a long time.
sure. Hmm.
And part of me was, there's always been like these practices around faith and religion
Hmm.
that spoke to me in ways that were different than, say, like Catholicism,
Uh-huh.
right?
Right.
Like textbook Catholicism. Now, I've never
Right.
been baptized. My parents took me to Catholic church. My mom was very adamant about always letting it be my decision to
That's good.
choose what
Hmm.
spoke to me and how
Hmm.
I wanted
Hmm.
to live my
She
life.
didn't force anything on you or push you to
No,
do anything.
no.
That's good. That's
Yeah,
actually good. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in that journey, and when I started going to Cuba, of course, like I knew about Santeria.
Hmm.
I had a very good friend and roommate too, who's Cuban, who practiced Santeria and
Mm.
Catholicism, of
Mm.
course, because there's the
Many people do, right? Right.
yeah.
Hmm.
And so, it was something that was always in our home, and it was always something that, like, even though his wife, she and I weren't like part of the faith necessarily,
Hmm.
we respected it.
Hmm.
And so on certain days we made offerings,
Mm.
things that we did in our home as
Right.
a sign of respect. Um and they all were just very natural. It
Hmm.
never felt forced. It never felt like, oh, this is foreign to me. Why am I doing this?
Right.
It just felt like this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
Drawn to it. Hmm. Hmm.
And so
Cool.
when I started spending time in Cuba and working in Cuba, they were, yes, there's more than just Santeria in Cuba. And also, Cuba is not the way it used to be. Like, there is
Mm.
all different religions there.
Mm.
You've
Hmm.
got the Episcopals there, you've got the Jews there, you've got the Muslims there. Like, it's
Yeah.
all there now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's cool.
So, don't let what you hear in the news media
Right.
tell you that they don't have freedom of, religion there. Like, they're all right. Don't worry about that. They'd be okay.
Mhm. Mhm.
Anyway, so Santeria just seemed very natural and normal.
Yeah.
There were certain aspects of it that just felt like it followed, it followed ancestry, it followed earth practices, it followed
Mhm.
spirituality, it followed karma, it followed
Mhm.
more than that. It also followed, or it's not even a following. It was something about how you carry yourself
Uh-huh.
through the world. How do you move through
Yes.
the world?
Yes.
What words come out of your mouth? What
Mhm.
actions do you take in this world?
Yeah.
And this is obviously a very abbreviated, conversation around it, but they were things that really resonated with me. So in that time, I just started incorporating that more and more and more into my faith.
That's cool.
And before the pandemic, I did have, I had somebody who would have been my padrino, a very dear and loving man. And I was in the process of discussing initiation.
Mm.
And initiation is a very serious commitment. And it was
Yes.
one that I, felt drawn to and was willing to make.
Yeah.
And it's not even a willingness, it's a knowledge of knowing that you're ready for it. You're
Yes.
really ready to,
You have
like,
to be ready. Yeah.
accept.
It's at least a year, that first year, right, of process. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's a year of really looking into yourself,
Mhm.
like digging up the demons,
Digging in. Yeah.
finding the good,
The
finding
shadow side, the whole
the
thing.
good.
Right. Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that was when you reach that place and you're ready. And I had been
Mhm.
through a lot, and I was like, I am ready, and especially coming into having found out about my family dynamic, like my fathers,
Mhm.
that was the point that I was like, I'm ready.
The background,
I'm
yeah,
ready to
yeah.
dig into this because I
Mhm, mhm.
also was ready to jump into like the ancestral traumas and
Oh,
how do I
ooh,
navigate
I
those.
got chills
And I
still.
knew that
Yeah,
taking the step would do it.
yeah.
Unfortunately, or fortunately, because I firmly believe that in the path of Santeria, the things are laid out in the way that they should be.
Mhm.
So COVID came. And I'm not saying like COVID was meant to be, but my path
Hmm.
being halted because of COVID, I believe that there
Interesting.
was a reason for it.
Mhm. It was not the right time.
Right. It
It
wasn't
was
the
not
right
the right time. Yeah, and that's
time.
something that I 1000% understand what you mean, and it may be hard for people to wrap their head around or may push back on this idea, but a lot of times delays, as frustrating as they are, being rerouted, things like that, it's actually for your highest good.
Oh yeah.
It's actually for your highest good, as frustrating as it may be. A lot of us went through a lot during COVID.
Right.
With all due respect, of course, like there's a lot of loss, right? A lot of people lost loved ones, family members, friends, etc. So it was a very difficult time. And, right, both and there was also a lot of self-reflection, I think, that people were forced to do. They were forced to sit in their house and examine their house, right?
Yeah.
Do that internal work.
House,
And all of
everything.
it, right? The internal and the external. Yeah, it's true. Like um yeah. Yeah, it really brought up a lot. I think you're absolutely right, and it's true. Like it is probably certainly it was for your highest good that was
Yeah.
not the time. That was not the right moment for it to happen,
Right.
and
Right.
it's
Yeah.
hard, but
And
yeah.
too, it's like
Thank
if
you for
it's
sharing, yeah.
like the same thing too, like if I'm going to respect the path that my
The process.
ancestors have
Yeah.
set forth for me,
Right.
then I have to accept that if this didn't happen, then I have to accept that perhaps that my ancestors recognize that like like the practice of Santeria and whatever it is that I do in my life, be it the whatever, like
Hmm, hmm.
all those things help me to be
Who
a
you
better,
are.
help me to be who I am, help me to navigate the world.
Yeah.
Maybe that my ancestors also are telling me that like it doesn't necessarily mean I've got to go through the initiation.
The whole full, yeah, yeah,
Be
yeah,
part
yeah.
of who I am. And so that's how I took it.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah.
part of who I am.
It is. It is
I've taken this
for
and
sure.
it's not a cultural appropriation. It
Hmm.
is, I'm not being somebody I'm pretending not to be. You know what I
No,
mean? Like
no,
it's
yeah,
a
yeah,
gift. These are gifts. I,
absolutely.
I believe that firmly that especially spiritual work, faith work, these are
Hmm,
gifts to you.
hmm, hmm.
Right?
Absolutely, absolutely. They're gifts, and yeah, I love what you said and what you've shared. It's these things, they came to you organically, right? Like you were exposed to them organically. And the flip side, right? We see people that, and I have my reservations about this, that go and basically they play dress up, right? Like for lack, to be very crass about it, they play, like I'm going to do this and I'm going to go do this. And I have serious issues with that because they don't really have a connection to the community.
Right.
They just think it's like trendy and cool and different.
Yeah.
And that, for me, is very problematic. Why? Because I have too much respect, right? I have too much respect for those elders and those traditions and rituals and things like that in all different countries, right?
Yeah.
To just think that I can just waltz in and be like, okay, now I'm going to be this, now I'm going to be that. No,
Yeah.
yeah.
Like I have a real problem
Yeah.
when folks are like, I'm gonna go to an ayahuasca journey. It's like, do you
Okay.
even you
You don't
don't
even know what you're into. You don't even know. Yeah.
you don't know, like
You don't even know what you don't know. It's,
don't
it's
let me hear you
crazy.
talking about peyote because then we'll really be deep.
No, then we're done. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like
Yeah,
it's
I mean that's
really, yeah.
yeah. And I guess too, that's a whole other I feel like girl, you could do a whole other
It's a
show.
whole other thing. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
People practicing yoga.
And the complete
Girl,
stripping of
you're
the
in LA.
spiritual side. Oh no, no, no. It's completely like uh how could I even like parsed out, watered down, dumbed down to I don't even know what it is anymore.
Yeah.
It's deeply problematic, you know. Yeah, I think they need to come up with another name for it because I don't think that it reflects yoga as its spiritual. It's a spiritual and the physical, right? It's connected, but I don't think that what most people are doing out there is like that.
Yeah.
So
I
I don't
can
know.
hear it.
It's intense.
It's the same guy who's trying to merge on the freeway in his Prius and he's flipping you off, but he
I
just
know.
goes
No, 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 no.
fast.
Oh my God. Get me started.
Anyway.
Right.
But yeah.
It's yeah, that is incredible. Thank you so much for sharing
Ah,
these different stories, friend. So let's see. So speaking of identity, and something that I think is really unique and beautiful about Drea is her family as far as her partner. So Andrea is married to a lovely guy, a lovely man who happens to be Persian. And so one of the things that Drea has navigated, of course, is navigating culture and family and cultural expectations and, the nuances of, you know, her husband and his family. And I know it's been I know it's also been a journey. She'll be making tahdig and making all these like
making tacos and Tahdig over here.
tacos and tahdig. That okay, that may be the title of this episode, tacos and tahdig. I love you so much.
Tigers and bears, am I?
That's so good. Yeah, so if you don't mind sharing kind of like, yeah, like walking us through, what was it like today? What has it been like to be
Yeah.
married now? And I know, his family obviously like lives abroad. They don't live in the US. And most of
Right.
them are not in California. And so, yeah, just, if you don't mind sharing
Sure,
about,
yeah.
your relationship.
I met him on the interwebs. I met him on Bumble.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just kind of like, I wasn't looking for anything serious. I was looking for
Right.
somebody to like hang out with.
Light, fun. Yeah.
Some fun stuff, go to a movie, go out for drinks, dancing, whatever. And I certainly was not interested in dating Persian. Like having
Oh my God.
done work in Iran, having worked with Persian,
I see.
I was like, yeah, no.
Oh my, that's so funny. So your initially you're like, I don't know. That was kind of your hesitation at first. Oh, funny.
And so we met, and I was like,
Cupid struck.
we went out for kebab for our first date.
Stuff.
And I was like, huh,
Kind of like her.
it's all right. And
So
then we
funny.
went on another date, watched the sunset from the cemetery
Oh, how
wide open. It was amazing. And then it was in that date, though, I was like, uh-oh. Like something felt significantly different. And I was telling myself, like, good,
You're like,
good, don't
the feels. Oh no, I'm feeling the
like,
feels.
yeah, and he had made me dinner that night, like early
Ooh.
dinner. He made me a Persian dinner.
Mm,
And I had khoresht game. I'll just say it for those who might be
mm.
curious.
For
And
any Persians listening.
yeah. So, we went and watched the sunset. We talked, and he really opened up to me about like his situation being here
Mhm.
in the US and where his family is. And I was like, "Oh, girl, don't do it. Just don't do it." But you can't tell me nothing. So, we started our dating journey, and then next thing you know, the pandemic hit.
The
And
panini, yeah.
it was pandemic. It was like incredible because, it was a perfect time to date. Really was. All we
Yeah.
had was
All the
like, yeah,
distractions were removed, honestly, honest to God. Yeah. You're not the first person to say that actually, it just forced people to be more focused, almost like more simplified, like stripped down, no more crap, no more distractions, bullshit, whatever.
we didn't go to
Yeah.
restaurants. We really
You couldn't.
literally
Yeah.
made all our meals
Yeah.
inside, except for like getting pizza or something. And the thing is too, like our dates were like outside, so we were constantly going to the park, riding our bikes,
Yeah.
going to watch the
That's
sunset, going
cool.
to the beach, like, and just really
Nature and
quality
connecting.
time
Yeah. There
together.
you
Yeah.
go. Yeah.
And, then I met his like family online. So all his family is in Tehran, mostly in Tehran.
Hmm.
He has an uncle that lives here and his brother who lives here.
Hmm.
And yeah, it was interesting because I was also, his family seemed pretty liberal. So, they're
Mm.
Muslim.
Mm.
So I was always kind of like curious, like, what are they going to think about him dating a non-Muslim?
Mm.
They had, if they had their reservation, of course they have reservations. Of course they're like kind of curious.
Mm.
Everybody was curious about me. And then it wasn't just that they were curious about me, it's like they were curious about the Mexican too. So, and he
Right.
didn't like divulge that about everybody, about that, didn't divulge that about me to everybody right
Okay.
away.
Hmm.
Because he's like tiptoeing because he doesn't really know what this is going to be, just like I didn't know.
Right. He's trying to like feel it out as well. Sure. 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 Sure.
So,
Yeah.
and in the meantime, I knew a little bit of Farsi.
Mm.
So everybody was just like, just fascinated. Like, who is this,
Who
like,
is this girl? Yeah.
pinata over here? Like, what the
Yeah.
hell?
And this is for folks like I hate to like interrupt for 1 second. The funny thing is, Andrea had been taking Farsi classes before. This is wild. I'm talking, I
Yeah.
don't know, man, like destiny, fate, whatever you want to call
Like
it,
we were saying,
divine
let me
timing,
lay out a plan for you.
laying out the plan, like of all for real,
Yeah.
of all languages, the fact that you happen to be, invested and learning Farsi, and then,
Yeah.
right, and
Yeah.
then you meet the man that you will marry, right, that you end up marrying, and he happens to be from Iran.
And he
Who
always
knew?
likes to joke that I learned Farsi for him, but I'm like, Zahramad, which is snake venom, but it's like,
That's funny.
yeah, no, like, but yeah, so they were
That's
like,
hilarious.
that was one of the things too that intrigued, like he was intrigued with too, is
Yeah,
that I like had learned Farsi, that we could converse. So,
so
and then I was
funny,
making
right?
an effort and I wasn't necessarily stumbling.
Hmm.
So, I mean, of course I've stumbled on my language, but yeah, so,
Wow,
um, and his mom came to visit shortly after we got married, and it's been wonderful.
that's awesome. Yeah.
There haven't been, also because I've done work in Iran, like I understand the cultural
Awesome.
like norms, so I don't
You're
have,
really prepared, actually. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
I mean,
Good.
they don't expect me to cover up. They don't expect me to wear a rusari or a head covering,
Hmm.
nothing like that.
Hmm. Hmm.
They call it rusari, not hijab, but whatever. Um, tomato, tomato. But yeah, so there are times though, like he does have an uncle who's a little bit more conservative.
Mm.
So when he's visiting, I don't wear like this. I'll wear like a little sweater over it. You know
Hmm.
what I mean?
Hmm.
I don't wear
Yeah,
short hair. I
yeah,
don't have a
yeah,
problem with that. You know
yeah.
what I mean? But yeah, they have just been so loving and accepting,
I
and
love
we
it.
really enjoy our time together. Now, there are certain cultural things that we don't get right. I don't get right.
Mm.
And starting off, I'm not going to lie, it was a challenge for him because Persians have a very, I don't want to say all, but I would say many
Majority, many. Mm.
have a very preconceived idea about Mexicans
Mm.
specifically.
Mm.
They have this very like media, like I would say also
From the media, like,
a Trump visual media
oh, mm,
perspective of Mexicans.
I
They
see.
think about people as being,
A negative vision
yeah.
of, mm,
Also, like they had this concept
that's
of
tough.
like very
Yeah.
highly melanated peoples.
Uh,
There are, but just like here, everybody's on the spectrum of color.
yeah. Yeah.
They have this concept of like poor
Mm.
farm workers or people working in agriculture or
Mm.
housekeeping or,
Like a
maybe
limited vision, a very
very
limited
limited,
negative. Yeah. Yeah.
not a good vision and not an
Mm.
accurate one, obviously.
Well,
So I'm also, one thing that I'll say is I'm the most patient person in the world that you will
you
ever.
really are. You really are. Have like incredible patience. Yeah.
Also, because of the kind of work I do at a human rights organization, where that's the commitment. We're committed to
Yeah.
like giving people the opportunity to learn about people,
Hmm.
you know, from the people, not from the
Yeah.
media, and to like challenge their perspectives.
Sure.
So right away, I'm not saying I looked at him as a project, but I looked at it as like this is an opportunity
Mm.
to really let him understand that, you know,
Those
Mexicans are as
stereotypes are not
diverse
true.
people as
Yeah.
anybody.
Right.
And
That's good.
so,
Yeah.
it's even
Amazing.
like with his friends, it's been great though. Like they accepted
Mm.
me too, but like even it's challenged them and their perspective.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
wonderful,
They don't fit the box. You know
right?
what I mean? That's the thing is like you don't fit the box. And so I'm sure it's
Yeah.
a challenge for them or like refreshing for them too to be like, oh,
Yeah.
like we thought XYZ, but Drea is really awesome. And Drea is this, and Drea is like super cool, right? So it kind of like forces them to shift their perception, which is
Sure.
amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, and I
Like,
recognize my
it's so
privilege of
cool.
being able to, in the ways that I, embrace my Mexicanidad,
Hmm.
my
Yeah.
Latinidad, whatever you want to call it. And, but I think that if who I am allows for them to humanize somebody in a
Yep.
way that they haven't been able to
Yes.
before, then good.
Yes.
That's only
Yes.
good.
Yes.
So yeah, those are kind of the challenges. But
I
we
love
won't
it.
get into the culinary challenges of things.
Andrea is an amazing in the kitchen chef person. She is the winner of many a macaroni and cheese throwdown. I've had the privilege of taste testing said mac and cheese.
Oh yeah.
So good. I remember, oh my gosh, this was in the Bay Area. I think her friends had hosted like a mac and cheese competition. It was epic. It was so good. I remember, girl. I remember.
I
Oh my
remember too. Ooh, those parties.
God.
Yeah.
But
So,
yeah, that's awesome. So like,
which is
I
funny.
think,
I'm going to say something real
yeah,
quick. Mac and cheese is the one dish that I made for them.
yeah.
They were like, "What is this?" And I
Really?
was like, "Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Of all the
Oh
food
my
I
gosh,
make
it's
my
the most
award-winning mac
delicious.
and cheese, and y'all
That's
are
your
like,
signature dish. What?
oh, you could go. Just
Like,
goodbye.
no, 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 no.
We're done."
Oh my gosh. That's
No,
too funny. I know, I'd be like, I'm done. That's it.
no, no.
That's hilarious.
So,
But to your point, what you were saying in terms of like in the work that you do, it is part of the work to have this sense of compassion, you know. And I think that I truly believe like travel is such, it is a privilege,
yeah.
and also it just opens up the entire world to a person, like having those experiences and talking to people firsthand, hearing their stories. I was talking in another episode with a friend about stories, like the importance of storytelling, the importance of hearing people share their stories. And in addition to all the things that she's mentioned, another thing that Andrea does is that she's an awesome photographer. So Andrea has done a lot of photography, especially in her travels. And so as we're kind of wrapping up, I would love for you to share a little bit about, you know, your photography and kind of like what got you into photography.
Yeah. Well, I think I was always a curious kid.
Mm,
I was never afraid of things. So, when I encountered like my first homeless population in Phoenix, like
mm,
I wanted to drive around. I was trying to understand their story, right? Like why are these folks unhoused?
mm.
Um, and and I mean unhoused, not living in tents like on the street,
Street.
like on benches,
Yeah.
like there's not a
With
shelter.
nowhere to go. Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, so then in high school, I started taking photography classes there, and it really gave me this opportunity to be like, okay, now I have this camera. Now I can start maybe documenting it and understanding
Hmm.
stories. So that's
Hmm.
kind of where it took off.
Oh.
And then I took a little bit of a break after school. Then um, when I got started going back to college at Phoenix College,
Mm.
I started back in photography, and that is when it really took off. That was when I took my
Okay.
first trip to Cuba. That's where I
Mm.
was starting to travel. Went to Mexico a handful of times,
Mm.
and was really engaging with people and asking them their stories, learning a little bit about them, and then started like to curate my own little shows in Phoenix and getting published. And then when I moved, and which was obviously super super rewarding, and also having like shows um, where people could go and learn, like look at the pictures and like be captivated by this image of a
Yeah.
person, and then like I would always like write on the tag like something that would try to be very significant about the person,
Mm,
to give like even in a very small few lines, maybe somebody an idea about who these people are,
yeah.
all of them.
Yeah.
And then, like having being written up in the newspaper too, like was a
Wow.
real
It's so cool.
like dream for me too, because
Yeah.
they wrote like the kindest thing, but they were just also
Mm,
got it. They really
good.
got it. They
I
understood
understood what
why.
you were doing. Awesome.
So then when I moved here to California, I did a little bit
Mm,
of photography, but here was so expensive.
mm.
Like just the renting a dark room.
Oh,
I used to go
yes.
to Looking Glass Photo in Berkeley. So great, but also on a student budget was not.
It's hard to do. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very expensive.
Anyway, so I kind of took a break from that, and it wasn't until the pandemic when we were pausing, um, and I realized that like some of my most pivotal moments in my life, shifting moments in my life, happened with the camera. And
Wow.
I was like, you know what? I'm gonna pick my camera up again. And actually, that's so funny. It's sitting right here. This is the same camera that I have had since high school, and it is
Oh
the
my
same camera that
gosh.
I shoot with
I
still
love it.
to X370. I love it.
I love it.
Um, and I'm a strictly film girl.
Hmm.
But yeah, so
That's so cool.
yeah, photography is just like as you probably hear many photographers. I shoot mostly. I enjoy documentary portraiture. I believe that story can be told no matter what.
Yeah.
When you capture an image, there's a story there most of the time.
Hmm.
Most of the time, it's just it depends on how the photographer views it, right? Anyway, so in my travels, I've been very fortunate to engage with people, hear their stories,
Right.
and try to capture that with my camera.
Mm. It's
And
beautiful.
it's a very rewarding experience when somebody asks you questions about it
Hmm.
and they
Hmm.
have those aha moments,
Hmm.
or you've shifted their perspective, you
Yeah.
know, even for a second. Yeah.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Thank you. Thank
Yeah,
you, Drea.
absolutely.
Oh my gosh.
I'm getting ready to I yesterday and my inspiration for my birthday,
Hmm.
I came up with an idea. I'm going to do a photo essay here in San Jose. I'm not going to say what it's about, but hopefully in
Can't
the coming
wait.
months you'll hear about it. But yeah.
Perfect. I can't wait. That will be fantastic. So, friend, is our my last question for you, and this is a question I've been asking my guests, is because I hope that this podcast, in addition to being like fun, educational, etc., I also want it to be inspirational, especially for young Latinas. And so I've been asking my guests, what would you tell little you? Like, what advice would you give little Andrea if you could go back in time? What's something she needed to hear back then?
Something I needed to hear back then
Hmm.
was always be true to yourself, first of all.
Mm.
I think as a young person,
Ooh.
we tend to make so many decisions based on what others will think about us,
Hmm.
what other people expect of us, what society expects of us, um, what, you know, and when I say society expectations, whether those are like gender norms,
Whatever. Hmm.
whatever it is. And I think that it may be painful for some people to accept your truth because they haven't accepted their own, you know?
That's it.
And so just I think one of the things that's really important is stay true to yourself.
Mm.
Try to learn to be patient. I mean, being patient is a craft that you're going to have to work on forever.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
so definitely those things. And then I guess too, like just try not to live in fear. There's some
Mm.
quote that's like, "What would you do if you knew it was on like the other side of fear?"
Uh-huh.
And
That makes
you know,
sense. Yeah.
is such a powerful experience. And I
It
know
is.
obviously there's some people who have their legitimate reasons for people, whatever it may be, that they experience fear,
Yeah.
but don't let fear hold you back.
Hmm.
Like
Do
just
it scared.
stay
Do it
your
scared.
eye on
Yep.
the prize. Keep the
Mm-hmm.
vision. Never let go of it.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you have to make sacrifices, everybody has to make sacrifices.
Yeah.
But whether, it means you have to go on your job, do whatever, whatever, put food on the table. If your dream has always been to pick up
Don't
the
give up.
camera, one day pick up the camera.
Don't give up.
So,
Mm-hmm.
and always, always too, I think no matter where you come from,
Mm-hmm.
always recognize your privilege. That was
Mm-hmm.
one thing I think as a young person,
Mm-hmm.
I think I was able to recognize that about myself. So it's not necessarily I would give myself that advice, but I would give it to others because I think
Mm-hmm.
sometimes
Mm-hmm.
they miss the whole point about where they come from.
Yes.
And sometimes they have to stop and should possibly take a little look inside and recognize, well, you have the privilege of being able to say that, to do that, to eat that,
Mm-hmm.
to challenge that, to
Mm-hmm.
not want to do that.
Totally. Yeah.
But still remain true to yourself.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. That's beautifully said.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, you know, listening to that inner voice, I think it's true. There's so much pressure. It's very easy to get distracted. It's very easy to kind of be swayed into one thing or another in terms of our career, in terms of what we do, in terms of a lot of things that we're so focused on others and other people's opinion, right? Or making others happy that we really lose ourselves. And that is the devastating. Like that is kind of like the worst option is to lose yourself in the process.
Yep.
And sometimes, it's tough. Sometimes it takes us a little longer for that to click. You know what I mean? And sometimes, unfortunately, for people, it never clicks, right? They're just like always living for others, always like, following the trends, following, the norms and things, but I
And that's
really
okay.
appreciate that.
All I could say about that is it's unfortunate because I think what
It's hard.
happens is people
Yeah,
end up going to the grave with all these
it's tough.
with like resentments.
Exactly. Yeah.
Resentments and
That's
all
how it
that coulda,
manifests.
shoulda, woulda that they're
Or
holding
they
on
shoulda,
to.
woulda.
That's such a
Totally.
heavy weight to carry in your life.
It is. We gotta free ourselves. We gotta free ourselves. Liberation. Yep.
Yes.
That's the name of the game. Um, well, this has been amazing.
Thank
I
you.
love it. I love it. I love it. I heart to you. You're super awesome. Yay! So, everyone who's listening, thank you so much for being here today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I did want to mention that Drea actually was on a podcast as well. It's called the Baywatch Podcast. This is a podcast that was done back in 2019.
Right
This is
before I met my husband.
right before she met her husband. So it's about her
Let's
dating
put that out
adventures
there so nobody
in
gets
the Bay. Yeah. It's highly entertaining.
BAE watch.
BAE watch. Yeah. And I'll make sure to tag it and everything too. So,
Yeah.
all right, folks,
Also on
again.
the
Oh,
Instagram photo page, you can see
oh, yes.
some of the photos that I've taken and shared, and you can like or not, whatever.
I'll
I'll give
definitely
you the
tag.
info after, yeah.
Yeah, we'll definitely tag Andrea's photo page. It's Mizoho's, right? Mizoho's
So
photos?
this photo, yeah.
Okay, perfect. All right, folks, thank you for being here. Again, this is your host, Dr. Guerra, the Gold Hoops and God podcast. Make sure to follow us, like, share, and subscribe. We are everywhere you listen to your podcast streaming. We're also on YouTube. Season 2 includes the video of the podcast, which is super fun. Feel free to email me or engage on Instagram. Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.